Now that we've talked about the main types of cells, prokaryotes and eukaryotes, let's start to look at what's inside those cells. So if we look at a prokaryote, it's very simple. There's really not much inside it. If we look at a eukaryote, they've got a lot of little structures inside. Each one of these structures is called an organelle. So prokaryotes, no organelles. Eukaryotes do have those organelles. Now let's move on to our table. Now, as we go through this, we're going to be putting check marks, whether it's bacteria, animal, or plant, or all, and what each one of these structures does. So the first one we're going to look at is a cell membrane. Well, if we recall, a cell membrane is a part of Dr. CC. That last C stands for cell membrane. So we are going to come over to our table, bacteria, animal, plant. Check, check, check. All of them have a cell membrane. And if we look at the cell membrane is kind of this outside part. So we're going to label cell membrane A, and we're going to write the letter A right up here. And we are going to draw a line to the outside of this cell and the outside of this plant cell. It's this lining right here of the plant cell and this outside lining here. Now, if it's on the outside, then what that means is it is for protection of that cell. So we're going to write the function is the cell membrane is kind of the gatekeeper. It controls what goes in and what goes out of the cell. Second thing we're going to look at is the ribosome. Well, again, that's part of our Dr. CC. So a ribosome is in, there we go. A ribosome is in a bacteria cell, animal cell, and plant cell. Again, it's in all of them. So let's find out where that ribosome is. Let's label it B. Ribosomes are going to be all of the little tiny dots inside the cell. So in the animal cell, it's kind of be these things over here. In a plant cell, I see a lot of dots kind of accumulated right there. Those are going to be your ribosomes. Now, the next thing we need to do is write down the function. So the whole function of a ribosome is to build the proteins. Without the proteins, the cell wouldn't be able to perform its functions. Next thing we're going to look at is the cytoplasm. The cytoplasm is in all of the cells. So again, we are going to come to our diagram, and we're going to put check marks. Every single one has cytoplasm. And we're going to label cytoplasm as organelle C. So the cytoplasm is going to be what holds everything in place. So we're going to call it the jelly filling of the cell. Write that down. If a cell did not have cytoplasm, everything would be all over the place. Cytoplasm is what keeps Sorry about that. The cytoplasm is what keeps everything in place. Without the cytoplasm, everything would be everywhere. So the cytoplasm is going to kind of be all along the inside of that cell. So if we look at our diagram, we are going to label cytoplasm C. And if I'm looking at the cytoplasm, then I am basically looking at all of this blank space in the middle here. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about is the D. So D is our last part of Dr. CC. D stands for DNA. So let's come down here to DNA. Bacteria has it, animal has it, and plant has it. All of those have it. And DNA with bacteria, instead of being in a nucleus, it's going to be kind of free, kind of floating around there. And the DNA we are going to label as F. And if we look in our animal cell, DNA is going to be right there inside of the nucleus. And same thing over here in the plant cell. That DNA is going to be right there inside the nucleus. So let's talk mitochondria. So a mitochondria is basically something that is the powerhouse of the cell. Now, a mitochondria is an organelle, so bacteria isn't going to have a mitochondria. Only the animals and plants are going to have that. So we're going to come over here, only put a check mark in plant and animals. We're going to label mitochondria D. If we come up here, the mitochondria, those are these little structures right here. Label those D. Mitochondria right over here are going to be these little structures. And like I said, mitochondria are going to be the powerhouse of your cell. So it's the power plant. It provides the energy. Write that down. All right, now let's get to this big old nucleus we've been talking all about. So the whole purpose of the nucleus is that it is the brain. It holds the DNA. And as we said, bacteria, there ain't no nucleus in there. Only the animals and plants have that. So we are only going to put a check mark under animal and plant. The others do not have that. DNA is the genetic information that's inside of that nucleus. So let's figure out where the nucleus actually is. We're going to label that. Oh my goodness. There we go. Let me get control of my pen. All right. The nucleus is going to be E. So the nucleus is basically what's going to contain it. Nucleus is this whole thing. So we just finished labeling the nucleus as E. Now what we're going to do is label it on the animal cell. So there's your nucleus. Label it E. And over here on your plant cell, that's going to be right here. Again, the thing that's holding that DNA right there in the middle. It's going to control all of the functions of that cell. Now, a cell wall is going to be the kind of equivalent as a cell membrane. The difference between a membrane and a wall is a membrane is very flexible. It lets things in and out. Cell wall is very rigid. It provides structure. So the only place we're going to see that is a plant. Sometimes we might see it in bacteria, but not all the time, only sometimes. So let's label the cell wall G. And if I look up here at my pictures, I have the animal and plant. Remember, only plants have that cell wall. That's this very rigid structure right here, and we'll label it G. The whole purpose of a very rigid structure is to provide support. So that is going to provide our structure and support. Now, as a summary, the whole point of looking at each of these organelles is to understand each of these functions, what it does, which cell it is in, and how you can determine whether it's prokaryote or eukaryote. So let's sum this up by writing those discoveries down here right at the bottom. So a bacteria cell, they have no nucleus. It is free-floating DNA. That means they're prokaryotes. If I'm an animal cell and a plant cell, I have a nucleus. My DNA is contained in that nucleus. So I am going to be eukaryotes for both my animals and plants. And that sums up our summary of animal versus plant versus bacterial cell.